Okay, Cassie, can you elaborate a little bit on the background of Schneider Electric, and
Absolutely.
in this case also in relation to the SBOMs?
Yes.
We actually talked this morning about, let's say, the overall perspective of software bill of materials. We had just before you entered, before we had our lunch break, we had Gonda Lamberink from Fortress. Also talking a bit about, yes, and so she told us. So she shared a bit of the experiences that she had, at least from Fortress in the US. So more from a vendor perspective, as in a vendor of software solutions,
right.
support SBOMs. But of course, in your case, it's quite different. And so maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on the perspective of Schneider Electric, which is by origin still a European company. You're based in the US, so representing, of course, the necessity for Schneiders in the US. So if you could put us a little bit in the context and then talk a little bit about your experiences with the SBOMs.
Oh, sure. All right, so Schneider Electric is headquartered in Paris, France. It's a French company, and we're 29 billion, 140,000 employees, and we have approximately 10,000 people in R&D. Okay, so very large global footprint. Our R&D centers, and along with our company, we are very distributed across the world. We, in APAC, Europe, and also US, there are significant development centers, or North America actually, significant development centers spread around. Our customers are also very global. Our sales and our customers are equally divided in those three zones. Well, not fully equal, but fairly equal. With the type of customers that we have, I would say that most of the ones I work with closely are in the critical infrastructure space. And that means that they work in the utility industry. It could be pipelines, wastewater, just so many different industries. But we also have, some of our brands that you may recognize are Square D, which, from electrical, you might see it on control panels, but also APC, which used to be American Power Conversion. So a lot of data center work of what we have for our products. Then also from our product lines, we have a lot of PLCs, and so a lot of items for industrial automation. So both energy management and industrial automation. I would say the majority of our portfolio is an OT-based portfolio, although we have many cloud products, SaaS type of products that we call digital offers. And we do have software applications that are deployed on premise, usually with the term advisor or expert advisor, because they connect to different devices, both of our own platforms and devices from other companies. So we have a portfolio, I would say, of smart offers that are over 20,000. So the reason we were in the SBOM space, our program started about 4 years ago, and it was for the purpose of vulnerability management. So it was started by the vulnerability management team to have insight into the portfolio of products, so that when a vulnerability surfaced out there, that they could identify which offers. We have a process that we call impact assessments, where if something comes in, a critical CVE, that we contact all of those different development teams to find out if they are impacted. And the SBOMs were, that intention for that project was to collect SBOMs so that it can be searched for, because we have tools internally that do static code analysis that everyone uses. And the search features on those tools, let's say, are very limited, especially 4 years ago, where they did not contain the information that we wanted. And at that time, they actually failed anytime we had commercial components, because sometimes we buy commercial libraries and we have commercial operating systems, and those tools are meant to be open source. You know, they're very good at identifying some open source pieces, but they do not do well with commercial or proprietary information. So the SBOM initiative was started because of that. And then in June of 2020, I received our first customer contract asking for a software bill of materials. And that was because the Edison Electric Institute contract template that's used in the Americas had just released that template, and it said you must provide software, hardware, and firmware bill of materials, and also country of origin. So actually, when we first started, I would have to cross that line out because we did not have the SBOMs for our products, and I couldn't commit to our customers to provide that. And then so I immediately joined the CISA working group for SBOMs, and joined with the vulnerability management team. We're all part of the Global Product Security Organization, and took over the SBOM initiative in the company, which, you know, was a project then, but became an initiative in order to determine how are we going to fill this contract requirement in the future. And so I joined the CISA working groups on the adoption side, because they were rather than the framing group, and then worked with that organization to help develop the materials and the languages, but also internally worked on processes to start collecting SBOMs. So starting in January of 2021, this was before the executive order that I'm sure you all are aware of. So in January of 2021, our release process required from a mandatory purpose that every product provide a software bill of materials to our teams. And so we implemented a collection process. It was very manual. It was a Microsoft form. Unless they could provide the SBOM through one of the tools, but at that time, the tools, as I said, they were still very weak. In fact, I met with our tool companies, and they were like, SBOM, why do you need that? So they were really in that space. They considered it, yeah, we can generate a list, but they still were failing at doing commercial libraries, or even being able to identify those. So in January of 2021, we started collecting the SBOMs, working with our tool vendors. We have another tool vendor that was more of a startup that we worked with them to start moving down the SBOM route so we could do searches. And then in May of 2021, as you know, the executive order came out. The language for that definition for SBOM came from the adoption group that I worked in. So I was like, showed my even family who have nothing to do with cybersecurity. I helped write, the language for this item that went into an executive order by President Biden. So at that time, as soon as the order came out, at that point, the energy proof of concept also began in the US by the Department of Energy. And we were part of that energy proof of concept in order to talk directly with utilities to see what their needs were. And we were, I would say, especially for the size of our portfolio projects of what we have, our product portfolio, we are very ahead. It is honestly very easy for a vendor to create SBOMs, but when you think about all the tens of thousands of SBOMs, and I'll talk about sort of the volumes that I'm expecting in a moment. But So we had started to capture the SBOMs. The executive order came out. We started working on the energy proof of concept, and we found out that that time that our customers were not even ready for that. I did speak internally to both our manufacturing cybersecurity leaders and our enterprise IT cybersecurity leaders to see if they had tools that could ingest SBOMs, and they did not. And they did not have any processes, and it wasn't even on their awareness of how to use it yet. So as an industry, taking those SBOMs for any reason, especially in 2021, was not on anybody's agenda. So I think that leads us pretty much to when you all started also from, you know, in 2021 and 2022, is everybody's like, okay, we have an SBOM, now what? What do we do with it? I do believe that customers are still at that point. We have, for our process to give an SBOM, we require a customer to have a signed NDA. If they're in the procurement process, I have a special NDA just for SBOMs. And so we have provided some SBOMs to customers. A couple of them wanted it in PDF format, and some of them wanted it in Cyclone DX format. And so we have only really at this point given it in very limited ways. Internally, from a project and initiative standpoint, we looked at using any internal tools to store our SBOMs. And I believe anybody in the manufacturing industry, you probably have heard of Windchill. We use Windchill. We have it relabeled as something. And they can support SBOMs, but not at the volumes and the frequency that we're expecting. And then we did a proof of concept with external vendors, and I can't release and talk about which one we selected, but we are in the commercial process to bring in a tool that specializes and manages SBOM storage and distribution. And the reason we have, I see someone leaving, thank you.
So, sorry, one of the speakers that was just leaving, and you saw that. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So I'll talk about the volume, and then I'll be happy to take any questions from you and who's in the room. So the volume of what we have internally captured is nearly 4,000 SBOMs, and that's just based off of the recent releases over the last 18 months. We have hundreds of projects. Like I said, our portfolio of products is in the 20,000s in regards to smart products, that many commercial references. And I am expecting our SBOM volume to reach over hundreds of thousands when you consider every release is its own individual SBOM. And we are capturing and requesting SBOMs from any third parties at this time, and they come in all formats. So that's the expectation from the capacity. And that doesn't even include then going back to legacy versions, because in an OT world, unlike a cloud world, there's many versions that are active at a time, or if you give somebody software and they install it. So we could have 20, 30 active releases that are out in production used by customers. And of course, our products can be decades old. So going back and running and being able to capture the SBOMs for legacy code, we have not started that initiative yet. However, when the customers come and request, they apologize and say, I'm sorry, we're not using the latest version of your software, but we need the SBOM for this version. And it's usually two to three versions back. So that requires the development team to do a very manual process to locate that version, of course, in the in the library, and then run scanning tools to give them the SBOM for that. We realize that people are going to want the software bill of materials for older versions, and we will want to use it for investigating for vulnerability management. So from a space of using SBOMs, I believe that maturity-wise, we're definitely in the leading of the pack, but in scaling an SBOM initiative, I think we're right at the top, because I talk with people in all, especially major manufacturing and industrial space, and I live in San Francisco, so I'm with all of the companies that you would recognize, and they're not dealing with the proportions or scale that I'm generally working with my portfolio.
That is, to say the least, impressive. In any case. I mean, how difficult was it actually to get the development teams to start working on this? It's been a decision that was that came to them from the top down.
Yeah. So we did a gradual, like I said, it was required as of January 2021. However, I did not start checking full compliance until this year. So we were starting to monitor and track compliance. And honestly, when we began this year, there were a significant number of 2021 SBOMs that had not been submitted, and then 2022. So so we began sending out dashboards and alerts. I didn't want to do that in the beginning because the tools were very immature. So I'll talk about the tools in a second, a little bit more. So what we did is, by the time April came around, then I changed sort of, not only were you on the compliance dashboard, but if you have not provided it within 30 days of release, because I realize when somebody puts out a product, there's a lot to go on, right? So I'm not expecting the second they have a gold release of code for them to submit the SBOM, because no one would be asking us for that, and that product is not yet out in customer hands. So the need to do the vulnerability management scanning is not required. So so they need to require it now within 30 days of their release of date. And we are now by giving them that time to grow the maturity. And like I said, I'll talk about the tools in a second. We are now at 99% compliance within 30 days. So it did take time, but they definitely appreciated that time to get their build pipelines and basically integrated with different tools. So we have 2 SCA tools that can generate SBOMs, and they can pull the SBOM from there. But also now we don't mandate which SBOM generation process they use. So there is Yocto used by some of the teams, and then some of the teams are using the Cyclone DX project, depending on the languages. However, we do have some older C code and C++, things like that, because of the OT and the legacy part of our portfolio. So using that SCA tools are important in order to generate those. And also, those teams may only build once a year for some of those older OT products. So the community, our large number of projects, they have integrated it into their process and pipeline for the compliance. We do not get any, we've provided enough internal resources, both with people and documentation, that they're able to do this now. So not a problem for adoption. What I am still running into every day is suppliers in regards to some of them are very experienced working and familiar with SBOMs and are able to provide that. And they don't consider their SBOMs to be confidential, so we don't have to worry about a secure place for them to provide it. But some suppliers, we're generally still getting the question, or the comment, no one's asked us for this yet, so give us time to capture this for you, and what format do you want it in? And we do prefer Cyclone DX as the process, but however, we transform them if we need to. In fact, one of the customers requested one, and they wanted it in the Cyclone DX format, but the SBOM format that we had from that team had been a PDF, so we transformed it into Cyclone DX. So we do expect a lot of that moving back and forth in the future between formats until there's a clear winner in the space.
Okay, thanks for all of that. In general terms, maybe it's not set as guidance, but is there some specific components that you would require that an SBOM has beyond, let's say, the minimum elements as set out by the regulation?
Yes, absolutely. So the reason we went the Microsoft form route is when people are submitting their SBOMs, and we're doing this, we even ask this information if we receive the SBOM generated out of the SCA tool or such, is we ask for a lot of product metadata. Our commercial reference system, so I'll just pick a product name, our M580 product. Commercially, you can see it on our website as M580, but let's pretend it had a different name a long time ago. That's, that internally it could be some other product name because we've relabeled it. So in SBOM itself, if you look just at the minimum data elements, it may not have somewhat of a history to it that would help us be able to connect it to which product is this in our, when we look at our pen tests and our final cybersecurity, we're trying to match and connect all that traceability to say this project is for this product, but it's commercially known as, whatever this name is. So we find the naming problem to be even difficult internally, especially when you're working with 20-year-old legacy products that have been part of a different company acquirement and so on. So we do ask, and I'm pulling it up right now, the metadata, so I can just give you an idea of what we're requesting. So product name is a big one. Of course, we want to know, some release information about it, because the SBOM is, let's say, the SBOM is accurate for the SBOM. The version information is part of that. But those in the system space realize that often you're combining multiple products together into a product bill of materials, or you may have an SBOM that is from one group, and then combined with another group, it makes this other product that gets released. So to be able to do all of that, we do have to sort of understand our portfolio of offers better. So let me, give me 30 seconds to pull up the right file with the metadata information. And we don't really want all of this metadata to be put into the SBOM minimum elements. So we're actually quite happy that right now that the minimum elements are so minimal, because it means that we can add on what we feel is necessary. And we have not had any customers ask for additional information yet, but it gives us a chance to really make sure that those minimum elements are accurate, and augment with other items. So just a moment, let me find my program slide and the Okay, I brought it up. Let me get to that page. It's in an appendix. Okay. Okay, so we also ask for information about hardware versions. So as you all know, in the IIoT space, we usually, our OT products are combined and part of a hardware. So we ask for the hardware version because that way we can do the traceability. In the future, we haven't checked the accuracy of that. We, as I mentioned, commercial reference IDs, so we can acknowledge where in our portfolio this is tied to, the product range, the internally known project name, formally externally known offer name, the market segments. But we also ask where they are in the product life cycle, because we realize that if this is a product that it could be a brand new product that we haven't even released yet, but it could be one that's planning obsolescence. And so we ask information about, do they have an end of commercialization date? Do they have a limited support date? And then the region sold. That is an important one for us because when we initially started capturing this, the only region that was asking for SBOMs was in the Americas. And that is still the case. So I'd be interested, sometime when we ever get a chance to meet in person to find out what appetite you are seeing in Europe for asking for SBOMs, because none of my European customers have asked for it yet. And then we also ask a few other details just to understand is if there's network connection applicable to the offer, because we were seeing, and I'm sure you all are too, connected offers. There's a lot of IoT regulations, especially like the California Connected, but we want to have more insight, just because an offer is a smart offer and has code, and we have a software bill of materials, doesn't mean that it's a connected offer in regards to our legacy. So we want to be able to say this offer is a connected offer, which most of them are. And we also ask for the file hash of itself, of the SBOM. So we have not, I've seen just in the last couple of days on one of the SBOM working groups, they're looking for procurement. I do want to state that we are not asking our teams to sign the SBOMs yet. Again, right now I've got nearly 4,000 SBOMs. Most of those were produced from the SCA tools. So I will have to implement a process to sign and, a procedure to sign anything generated out of tools automatically, so the teams don't have to do that manually. Out of a build pipeline and, something of that nature, they absolutely can sign the SBOM, when they're signing the code itself. But it's not something that any of my customers requested, and it's not in any of the regulations at this point that the SBOM has to be signed. I think that because we're still in the crawl space, the requirement for the authenticity and the integrity, you're getting it from Schneider Electric, just accept that fact for the moment. And I will give you the SBOM, I'll sign it if somebody requires it. But I do not have I'm on the DBOM group. I'm in all sorts of different, the SCIT group. I think there's a long way to go in regards to authenticity, integrity of every piece of the pipeline along the way. And so I'm just honestly not concerned about signing SBOMs at the moment, because I just, if someone's concerned about the integrity of the SBOM, then they've got a lot more problems to worry about rather than that at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's Again, impressive. There was one thing that came up this morning as well, and I think also quite particular and peculiar in your case, but very interesting. The relation that you built from creating the SBOMs to basically also the certification or the at least preparation for certification of devices. Mm-hmm. So IEC 62443-2, I think in your case, was it? Or -1?
Yeah. Oh, so we've got SDL -4-1, but then some of our products are 3-3 certified, and the deployment processes with 4-2. And so which one? So in 4-1, our SDL, it's mandatory. We've updated the version of 62443-4-1 had a sort of, you should know your internal components. It was, I think, SM95, I can't remember right now. And I even wrote an article for the ISA GCA blog about that. We have extended that requirement in 4-1 to specifically mention software bill of materials. But I don't know if that was your question. So can you ask more?
Yeah, so I think the question was more in relation to the process of relating those two. So how can basically you use the development of the SBOMs from you as a company, as a vendor producing devices and equipment to facilitate the certification process, or at least working with the use of the SBOMs and the SLDCs towards the certification of the products? Right.
So as of yet, so on the certification side, let's say we're doing a product certification for 3-3. They're providing now the SBOMs as part of that. I have not heard any objections or issues. Most of the time, I would say the certifiers are, depending on if it's a conformance to process or if there's true testing involved, they are also scanning themselves. That would not work if it's an encrypted firmware. Some of our products have encrypted firmware, and we would have to provide that that level of detail. So let me step back and let you all know that back in 2020, we began, it might even been the discussion started earlier, we began working with the US Department of Energy on the Citrix program. And that was a very detailed process for them to, I would say, not certify, but verify the products that are in use in critical infrastructure in the US. And one of the requirements at that time was to provide a hardware bill of materials and software bill of materials. So when I engaged on the software bill of materials project, I asked to see the SBOMs that were provided, and one of which was an Excel document listing a few components, and one of which was referred to our documentation, so there was no real SBOM provided. And so there was, and Cyclone DX wasn't even a concept. We had SWID, you know, as one of the third one had, I think, a SWID output. So what the Department of Energy did, just like Fortress can do if it's not encrypted, is they used their own tools to generate SBOMs. And I still believe that that will be the case for any certification, is that even if a manufacturer, you know, software publisher provides the SBOM, the certifying agency will generate their own. And that the only time when that can't be accomplished is when it's an encrypted encrypted firmware or encrypted in some way where they cannot reverse engineer it.
Yep. Okay. There were some questions here from the room, but I'm looking for
yeah, I will have one. Can you hear me?
I can hear you some, so I'll try to listen really well.
Okay.
Otherwise, you come over here.
it's you have mentioned that you have arranged to or to achieve that everybody has to present an SBOM after the release. And there's two things that I have, because first of all, congratulations, because there are not many companies doing that already. Whom did you have to talk to get this approval or this commitment to force teams to deliver the SBOMs? And second, why did you choose to receive them or be compliant when you receive them 30 days after the launch or release?
Okay, so I'll answer the first one and then probably have you repeat the next one. So in regards to, I am, and I didn't think it was on there. So I am the product security officer in the global product security organization. I own the SDL in the company. So I am in governance, and I'm the owner of the policies. And so I have the authority to do quite a bit in regards to, we had already established many years ago, our SDL policy has been around for 7-8 years. So we already had a very robust SDL process. About 4 years ago, this is again the soft stage to sort of governance stage, is when the SDL policy was released 7 years ago. I would say it was a set of guidelines. Here's some tools and best practices. And it was 4 years ago that we really began to implement it and track from a governance level. And we've gone deeper each year. And so it was not difficult, because they should have already been tracking the SDL, the components inside of their tools. However, nobody was asking it. And honestly, it wasn't the most important thing to check in all of our, cybersecurity reviews that we do at the release stage. There's a lot more important things to discuss, such as pen test results. The security posture of the product was not reliant at all on SBOMs. All right, so SBOMs have nothing to do with the security posture. It is more of an operational need later on. We assume, because there's a different point in that step, that they've already verified the licensing. So SBOMs, one thing that people may not, I'm sure you all know, but the licensing requirement to be compliant for open source licensing listed long before the word SBOM existed. So SBOMs didn't gain us that capability because it was already there. That's one of the main reasons people used SCA tools, was vulnerability management and license management. So I did not run into any, what we did is every year when we do a policy update, we announce to the community in the development world that we have, large development world, this is a new delta, a change, a new requirement that we expect you to have. And like I said, I wasn't going after them. The moment I announced it, here's the policy, I didn't go after them for that data. We did a lot of sort of webinars and coaching, and we were still using the tools and trying to get them to work right. So I wasn't going to acknowledge and have that problem. But one of the key points that I always, in every SBOM presentation I give to executives and any leadership, it starts with this is the reason we need it. And at first it was just the Edison Electric Institute contract template, which all of a sudden I received from 6 utilities saying they needed SBOMs. But as soon as the executive order came out, I had finally that, this is a thing, you can't ignore it after that point. So I'm able to, I would say the word justify, I'm not making them do this because just for paperwork purposes. It is a absolute, transparency request from our customers that we provide this. And we had, like I said, already been requested as part of the Citrix program to provide it. We just didn't even have a way to do it. So, and I think I did not have a hard time about the adoption because I took it in step fashion, just like I do any kind of policy change, to make sure that there's time for people to adopt and adapt their processes that are already in motion. So your second question was about the 30 days. So the reason for the 30 days, anybody that's working, so for example, let's say, and I mentioned I came from a development background. So I produce a gold set of code, but it would take time for it to get to the manufacturing floor. You know, they'd be setting up the lines and, you know, whatever's necessary. You know, if it's a new product, it even takes longer, but even an existing product, depending on when things are run. So they need to focus on getting that into it. Very rarely do we have unless it's a patch, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But right now, the 30-day buffer is a lot to do with they're overwhelmed and it's not automated yet to give us the SBOM pieces, and we don't have a good storage place for that. So right now, it's still more of a manual task for them to collect it, you know, if they have to do it manually. There are teams right now that we get it 5 minutes after the build, right? Or it's part of the build process and they provide it to us. And so they're able to meet, you know, a very fast SLA, but those are more, I would say, not mature, non-legacy kind of product teams that really have automated their CI/CD pipeline processes and can generate things fairly easily, such as, you know, I mentioned Yocto. There's already ways and paths to do it. So the 30 days is a grace period for those that are on more of a legacy platform where the processes are very manual. Now, once we have our SBOM storage area in place where we can have service accounts and ways for them to securely place that, and we have integration into those SCA tools. Next year, I expect that grace period to go down. I'm not going to make it 1 day, but I will make it less, maybe 15 days down to 10 to 5 and less. I didn't mention earlier, but at the moment, I'm not requiring SBOMs from the teams for our cloud products, because until CISA and the working groups come up with a definition and where the line is drawn in regards to the infrastructure of the cloud provider versus, you know, how are you going to do it? And honestly, SBOMs don't cover the container risk fully, and they don't cover configuration risk, which is a much bigger problem than an SBOM. So for example, when Log4j came out, those that have cloud offers and have a digital type of offer, we're able to make that change in a very quick fashion. It's very different from OT products, as you all know, where you want to make sure you do regression testing properly. It needs to go through interoperability and backwards compatibility testing because you can't break things and there could be safety implications. So we need to be cautious. So again, SBOMs for cloud, nobody's asked me for that yet. However, unfortunately, in some of the languages, even the US Department of Defense, RFI, they mention cloud. So I put in my comments about that piece saying, listen, your own group run by the government hasn't figured out how to do cloud SBOM. So we're still not even asking that internally. We expect the teams to know what's in their code, but I've had no request to say, provide me a cloud SBOM. And then I would just tell the customer, sorry, that's not, until real elements and a decision comes out, we're not gonna provide that. So I hope I answered that second question, but if you have a follow-on.
We have a thumbs up. Thank you so much. I'm realizing that I will need to let you go in a couple of minutes. There are just two things that you mentioned that you were going to talk about later on. So one of the ones I think had to do with the tooling. What specific requirements did you put out for the tools for you?
Okay. I actually have a requirements document that I hired a consulting firm because I didn't have enough time. So I had them investigate the space, but I also documented my own requirements internally about a distribution model and a storage model. So I have a set of 50 requirements that we're using for that we'll be testing against for the MVP. In regards to the SCA tool requirements, a lot of that was the pieces, the requirements that I gave them is their inability to manage commercial references, and we need to be able to tag a element. So for example, let's say, install.exe. How many install.exes do you probably have in the company? I want to be able to identify my proprietary install packages, what we call our bricks, as the Schneider Electric one, so that the SCA tools and other tools cannot always identify that. Like I said, they're fine with open source, but this is a proprietary library, and they need to be able to identify it at every single time. So those are the kinds of requirements that we've given the tool vendors because of their inability to manage that internal code set.
Okay.
You said there was one other thing. You said two questions.
Which I basically also forgot now. So
okay,
we'll come back, and if it does, then I'll text you about it. I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions, and recognizing that I think you need to go as well. Cassie, many thanks for sharing these great experiences